magnificent, undertaking, and to have that, and also the ambition of going to 500 gigawatts by 2030, okay, and having the mix that you have. So I think India is a very good example of what needs to be done in most countries. Every country has its specifics that it has to cater for, but if we don't invest in LNG, for instance, I'll give you an example. LNG today in Europe has spiked up to $15, $16. If you see what Qatar is doing, we are increasing our production of LNG from 77 to 160 million tons globally, to 142 in Qatar, and we have a project in the US that will take it to 160 that will start end of this year, early next year. So this production is going to start next year and incrementally increase in the next few years. If Qatar did not invest in this and take a decision for more than $100 billion of investment about 6 years ago, when people were saying we shouldn't be doing LNG and we should have all green and all renewables, imagine what would happen when you don't have that supply coming on the market. Okay, these spikes that you're seeing going to 16 could go to 25 and 30. So I think we are all supporting it. And this is just an example of LNG, for instance. But you look at the crude oil and others. The petrochemical sector, renewable cannot make plastics. It can give you energy. But you need refineries and you need oil products and you need to actually manufacture the carpets that we're walking on, the suits we're wearing. All of it has some form of oil and gas. So I think we need to be reasonable. There is absolutely no doubt the environmental issues that we're faced with need to be catered for. So if you look at what we're doing in Qatar, for instance, the LNG plants that we're building, we have the largest CO2 sequestration site in the MENA region. We're actually injecting 2.5 million tons today. We started in 2015 when nobody even knew CO2 sequestration, or most people didn't talk about it. We're going to go up to about 11 million tons of LNG. All our ships are powered by LNG. We're using the best equipment with the least emission possible. Qatar today, although we're the largest LNG producer, or second largest LNG producer now in the world, 10% of our power, about 10 years ago we had no solar power. In Qatar, 10% of our power is from solar. Mid this year, we're going to inaugurate another 2 plants. We'll have about 15% from solar. By 2030, 30% of the power in Qatar will be from solar. So we're doing our part to also make sure that we are doing our best on the environment. And I think we all collectively need to be fair, to make sure that there is ample supply of resources to make it affordable and reliable and available to all countries around the world for their growth and economic growth. And also we need to make sure that we're doing enough on the renewable and on the efficiency side to have a good balance. But cancel culture is wrong, and I think people are discovering that will not cut it.
And clearly all options need to be on the table, Saad, which is another way of framing what you said. And I would say that we got a sobering reminder of that during the Ukraine crisis and Germany's experience of pulling the plug, no pun intended, on nuclear with the benefit of the hindsight prematurely. Can I get on to the controversial and a rather topical question now? How has a second Trump administration, in your opinion, as policymakers, shaken up the global energy landscape? And Minister Puri, if I can start with you.
Well, thank you for asking me that question. I've been a student of foreign and security policy. I served 39 years in the Indian Foreign Service. My last term was as India's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. I had the great privilege of knowing President Trump when he was not the president, but I had the privilege of living in the World Trump Tower and He used to visit us every year, have a annual get-together with the residents of the World Trump Tower. I was minister in waiting when he came here on the first official visit. So I have watched the unfolding events with more than a sense of interest. Let me say that democracies, whether in our countries, those of us who are paneled here, democracies throw up verdicts. They will, this thing, Make America Great Again is a very powerful, catchy, this thing. We live in an interdependent world, so obviously, I can tell you from India's point of view, 50% of my GDP is in the external sector. So what happens outside, the value of goods imported and exported, value of remittances, all that shapes our GDP. There is one aspect of the new administration's focus on energy, which I must say is music to my ears. When the new administration says that more energy should come on the market, and more energy means prices should, come down. Clearly, for a country like India, which is both consumer and producer, there are some of my oil marketing companies who get upset every time the price comes down because their balance sheets don't show that. But as an Indian and as a line minister, I am very happy with prices coming down. My friend, my first point is there has never been a shortage of energy in the world. I mean, not now. There is more than enough energy available. What we are discussing here is this making available that energy. Now, what concerns me in all this is that, look, and this was part of my prepared notes, that we are still, whilst many countries are doing very well, they will transition, some will pay a higher price. You mentioned one country which took the February 22 this thing and ended up with consequences. But there's something called energy poverty. There are 1.18 billion people who are energy poor. There are 750 million who are lacking access to electricity and 2 billion without clean cooking solution. I think we can solve that problem quite easily. That problem should be resolved quickly. Then the past decade has been the warmest on record, 2024, 1.55 degrees Celsius rise above pre-industrial levels. How do you manage to do this and at the same time make sure that energy is available in abundant supply? Now, where I come from, and this is a deeply held conviction in my case, there is more and more energy coming on the global markets. I mean, it's coming from the Western Hemisphere to begin with. I mean, Brazil produces 3 million barrels a day. They're getting another 140,000 barrels they're going to put on the market. Suriname, Guyana, Canada, United States, by the way, 13 million barrels a day they produce, and I think another 1.6 million will come up.
And just on that, Minister, if I can just intervene quickly, Prime Minister Modi ji is going to be meeting President Trump
he's in Paris today, and then he will be proceeding to Washington for that.
Bilateral energy cooperation centred on an Indian commitment to buy more LNG and maybe a civil nuclear collaboration. Is that on the agenda?
No, I was addressing a press conference to prepare for this event to welcome all of you.
Yes.
And I was asked this question, whether further energy cooperation would be discussed. And I said, I would be surprised if it isn't discussed. I mean, as it is, the fact is we are buying $20 billion of energy from the United States every year. I have a long-term agreement with my friend, my brother here, which has to last till 2028. But I've already signed another long-term agreement. And it's an open secret. I mean, it's not even a secret. It's open. We are in the world for more and more LNG. We are expanding our capacity at the terminals, for liquefaction, gasification, etc. Now, I have already a commitment that I want to take natural gas, from 6% to 15% in my energy mix. Now, therefore, we are wanting to sign long-term deals. We are in the market, etc. So that is a given. What I would like to see are the transitions are orderly, and that they are without, if I may use the word, zigzags. And, for that, I think we need to sit down together and make sure that whilst we address our requirements of sufficient availability and therefore affordability, and we make sure our commitments to sustainability and transition are there, those parts of the world where clean cooking gas, for instance, is required, it's such an easy thing to solve. And I think that the Global Biofuels Alliance and other developments, if we all put down our heads together, we can make sure that no one is without clean energy for basic needs.
Nuclear.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Should that be on the agenda?
Oh, 100%. Look, it has to be.
And is it, and broadly, and I put this to all the panelists, is it an option? Because the way I see it as an observer of the energy transition is that, like it or not, controversial as it is, nuclear is increasingly emerging as an option. Nuclear reimagined, nuclear next generation, small modular reactors in this narrative, especially as it applies to this seemingly insatiable demand for power that's going to be generated through this AI boom and data centers.
I should have responded straight away because you had put that in.
Please.
Let me say that we've gone down that road. We went down that road. We signed the India-US civilian nuclear energy deal. We had an India-specific IAEA safeguards agreement. But somehow the commercial contracting never took place. There were problems, on liability and other things. But now we're talking about small modular reactors. I entirely agree. I think this is now very much a part of the discussion. And I also agree with you that all our net zero commitments, etc., nuclear provides a efficient, cost-effective thing, but you have to go through a particular road. And I'm sure that this is going to be a discussion point in major, wherever such discussions take place. I see that happening.
Minister, thank you for that. I want to bring in Minister Miliband and Dr. Mashaka Biteko, but before I do, did anybody want to respond to that? Diversification is a watchword that has come up time and time again in the conversations. Saad, you alluded to that. What is the optimum energy mix? Ed,
Well, look, can I first of all say what a privilege it is to be here at India Energy Week, and Minister Puri, I want to thank you for hosting us here today and to congratulate the Government of India on its vision for energy, for tackling climate change and all the other issues, including economic development, obviously, centrally. Look, I think there is a large degree of agreement on this panel about some certain truths. Minister Puri talked about the climate crisis incredibly compellingly, about the way in which it is not just some theoretical future threat, but is a real and present, and it's true across all countries. January was the hottest January on record. Secondly, I think there is a common narrative across all of us that we want to achieve economic growth and development, energy security, and tackling climate change all together. It's not a question of either or. We need all of those things together. And thirdly, then, all of us in our different ways, depending on our national interests and capacities, are going to pursue our own paths as part of this transition. And just to speak briefly about the United Kingdom, look, here is our position, which is the Russian invasion of Ukraine was a massive wake-up call for the world, but also for us in particular, because what we saw was a huge spike in fossil fuel prices, having a massive impact on our consumers, on our businesses and our public finances. And we are a proud producer in the North Sea of oil and gas, but we are also a price taker, not a price maker, on the international markets. And that means that we were hit in a massive way. So the experience of the United Kingdom is that for us, energy security, economic growth and jobs, and tackling the climate crisis all point in the same direction, which is to make this transition to clean energy as fast as we can. And to answer your question, nuclear must be part of the mix, renewables must be part of the mix, given the scale of demand for electricity our countries are going to face in the coming years, we need all of these technologies as part of this clean energy transition. And as my friend from Qatar rightly says, oil and gas will obviously play a role underpinning this transition. So I actually think that there is a large degree of unity across us on these questions, and I think we're going to shape our own pathways depending on the particular circumstances we have as a country.
It seems that there's no disagreement as to how to get there, but the method of how to get there, and the method of enforcement, policy framework, regulation, and the rubber really seems to be hitting the road at the moment. Is it incentives? Is it subsidies? Is it taxes? And Saud, Qatar and European Union are clashing on this very issue, and arguably it's an issue in the UK as well. So how do we square that circle, and what then is the optimum policy framework? Please.
I think what was mentioned by all of us is exactly the same. I mean, we all know there is a problem. We all know there is, from an environmental point of view, we all know that we need to have all energy sources. I mean, to me, you talked about nuclear. To me, any country that has the access to the technology, can do it safely and can afford it and doesn't do it, if their public is agreeable to it, I think they should absolutely do it. Because you need nuclear, you need gas, you need oil, you need renewables to get a good energy mix for the long term. So whoever can do it should do it. I mean, as far as nuclear is concerned, for instance, we need all sources. We're going to have a billion and a half to 2 billion people here in the next 30 to 40 years. You know, we're going to need the middle class is increasing. We need more power. We need more. I mean, data centers alone, people are talking about huge, power requirements that only 2 years ago were not even on the map of anybody or on the plans for anybody. So I think you need all energy mix. Every country is different. When you talk about Norway having almost 90% hydro, it's different than India, okay, and their situation with the population and the energy mix they can have. Qatar is different than, everybody's different.
I don't want to, just very quickly.
Please.
67 million people go to the petrol or the dispensing station every day in India to fill up on different forms of energy. So I asked myself a question, and we have an excellent biofuels program where we've achieved nearly 20% biofuel. I asked my colleagues, my secretary in the ministry and others, today the biofuels program is doing very well because the viability, the price is okay. It's not much higher than the petrol. So somebody has a conscience, we'll go for more biofuel when we have that E100. But if the price of green energy is out of range from cheaper other energy, then you are dependent on the goodwill of people to make the transition. I think governments have a responsibility, and at least that's how I look at our task, to make it, to do policy formulation in such a way that green energy gets a push. It can come in different ways. Incentivization, it comes in government tax and other bring. It comes through, like we have a PLI scheme for electrolyzer subsidy to make electro move to green hydrogen. So I think mix of both.
If I may just add to your point, beautiful point, but I think I would like to just add to that. If we keep supporting gas producers, oil producers around the world, to develop more and do it responsibly. There are ways to do it responsibly and ways irresponsibly. Most companies now have ESG requirements that they put in. You can do sequestration, you can do a lot of things. But for this equation to work, or this system to work, you need affordable energy, as His Excellency mentioned. These spikes that you see are increased tremendously if you have lack of supply. So when people keep harping on oil and gas producers and demonizing them, and you shouldn't be producing more oil and you shouldn't be producing more gas all along the last 10 years, that actually doesn't help in solving the environmental problem, and doesn't help in making this equilibrium or some kind of a balance between pricing that you need. So we need affordable, ample supply of oil, gas, and investment in all the other green initiatives.
Thank you for that, Saad. And let me just pick up on this point of affordability. Let me bring in Minister Bitoko. In Tanzania, your country has a lot of hydro, and that is something of a success story, and you're even exporting some of that surplus power to East Africa. So this issue of interconnectivity is a very important one, and give us a sense of how that is making energy affordable, not just for your country, but East Africa more broadly on a regional basis.
Thank you so much, moderator. But before I say what I want to say, I also want to thank the organizers of this event and the Indian government for extending invitation to us to be part of this India Energy Week, which I think is a place or a platform where we can share insights and learn from each other and see what we can do to make sure the population that we have back home are all powered by electricity or energy. Coming to your question, the world is very dynamic currently. We're facing a situation where we cannot be static. We have to face the reality. And the prescription of one size fits all cannot work in the current world, because the situation in Qatar is quite different from the situation in Tanzania, or the situation in India is different from the situation in any other country. So the bottom line is we just want to make our people have access to energy, and this is very, very important. So which way should one take? It is not one size fits all. It can be different from one country to the other. As you have said, and Minister Puri has said, close to more than 1 billion people in the world are lacking electricity, and 600 million out of that are coming from Africa. So if we take a prescription from the developed countries, then we want to fit it to the underdeveloped countries, then we miss a very big point. That's why I'm saying we have to face it with the reality at hand. The climate change, the emerging technology, the financing issues. These are the issues that one has to look at it and see which way one can have a pathway. So coming back to your question, in my country, Tanzania, the most dominant energy mix is hydro, where we are at 65%, and a few days ago we had an African head of state summit where we are discussing on how we can power the 300 million people to electricity, which they are lacking currently. We have a target where we want, in the year 2030, we want to push the entire country to 100 renewables, and hydro being one of the major sources of electricity. Now, currently we are relying on hydro, and we have natural gas, we have solar, and we don't use fossil fuel currently because of the price, which is very, very high. So the excess we have, what are we going to do with it? For instance, currently we have access of like 750 megawatt excess. What do we do with this excess electricity? That's why we subscribe to two pools, the Eastern African Power Pool and the SADC Power Pool, where we share whatever excess we have across our neighboring countries. Now, having excess is one issue. The second issue is how do you evacuate the electricity you have to your neighboring country? This is where the capital intensivity is coming in. You need money to put up the transmission line so that you can connect and create an interconnector between you and your neighboring country. Currently, we are putting up an infrastructure where we want to connect ourselves with Zambia, but we have already connected ourselves with our neighbor Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi, and Uganda, which also is underway. So we are sharing electricity. When one has a problem with electricity supply, one can get from the neighboring country. Now, what do we need to do? And I want to indicate this in this panel. For instance, we have abundance of resource, especially on the coal, We have also the uranium, which also is one of the sources for electricity. But how do you get the finances? Because there is this narrative that this is a no-go zone source of energy. So no one is interested to finance this, and this has now become a problem. The issue here is how do we manage emission? Whenever we do any activity, the emission management should be a key question to every one of us. And this is what we really say, bringing electricity to 300 million people in the next 5 years in Africa. It really requires a lot of investment, which we think, for instance, in Tanzania, we need close to $12 billion within 5 years to make sure the energy access which we have currently goes to 100%. So the interconnectors are very important, and we are busy working for that. And at least in our pools, the Eastern Africa power pools and the SADC power pools, as I have said, they are all in agreement that we have to create a space for us to make sure interconnectors are viable. And what we pray to the international community...
Can I just ask you...
let me finish one.
Please,
I'm finishing this one. What we pray to the international community, we really need just energy transition. And we need carbon space, because Africa actually is... The emission volume that is coming from Africa is very small. But the way it is treated is like we are pro rata, we are equal, then we have to be treated equally, which I think it can't be fair, and the just energy transition cannot appear. Thank you so much.
Getting back to the point of all options need to be on the table, are there red lines, though, here? And you mentioned, Minister, that your country is struggling to find financing to develop and invest in coal projects. Should coal even be on the table, since it is the most polluting fossil fuel? And Minister Puri, can I ask you for that and India's experience?
Well, I wouldn't want to provide any respect. There is a global narrative on this. You know, we should be moving away from all that. And I think the ability that you can move away will depend on how you're positioned. Now, for instance, it's very easy for me to do 20% biofuels blending, very easy for me to talk about solar, etc. But the fact of the matter is some of the coal will be there still. And I was, somebody tried to grill me the other day, oh no, we are dependent on coal. I said, no, you're missing the point. My electricity power, 17% is only 17%. But I have to find a way of transiting through that. I have to find a way of going out of it. Some countries are a little more vulnerable than others. But I would show understanding and then encourage all of us, including ourselves, to transition from that to cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. I mean, there was a time when we used to have these discussions, 3.5 years ago. I used to be told that gas is not entirely a clean this thing. To me, gas is very clean compared to coal or to other things. And therefore, I have no... Then, of course, the mainstream narrative also changed.
Thank you for that, Minister. Minister Miliband.
I mean, look, it seems to me that it's all about making the economics work. If you take the UK experience, we... were massively reliant on coal for a very, very long time, and we shut down our last coal-fired power station last autumn. And, you know, the economics has changed massively for us. So I was doing this job 15 years ago, and we were making a long-term argument about renewables being cost competitive, but they weren't cost competitive in the short term. Now, the cheapest form of power to build and operate in the UK is solar, onshore wind and offshore wind. Right. And for our colleague from Tanzania, I think, you know, part of the responsibility of developed countries, of the multilateral development banks and others, is to make the economics work, make the economics of this transition work. Personally, I think the transition is only going in one direction. This is an unstoppable transition because of climate reasons. And the truth is that oil and gas will play an important bridging role, but if we exploit all of our fossil fuel reserves, we should just be honest, we're going to have temperatures not of 1.5 degrees, not of 2 degrees, but of 3 degrees, 4 degrees. And this is just a scientific reality that we have to face up to. And so it is about making, this only works, this transition, if we make the economics work, as well as making the long-term climate imperative work.
I'm always looking for agreement in converging space. I completely agree. You have to make the economics work. And therefore, I think what we need to ensure is that what we are doing by way of transition is attractive also. Attractive means it's viable. I mean, if you take an ideologically doctrinaire position, which is what happened in this discussion right at the point, oh, this is bad, no more of this, no investment went in there. So the prices, by the way, if prices are high, that also accelerates the transition. But I think as responsible governments, we should ensure that the economic viability also factors into this. And therefore, at the end of the day, whilst everything will be there, you must lean and come in on the side of the cleaner energy. And I believe that is happening. And I also believe, I agree with it, the transition journey is very clear. If somebody had told me 5 years ago, but we will need natural gas, lots of it. My shut power plants will open up. My other economic activity will open up. Also, all the other newer energy, green hydrogen, by the way, the Honourable Prime Minister talked about a 5 million metric tons target of green hydrogen by 2030. I frankly think that is a target which we will do much better than that, because green hydrogen is suddenly shooting up. People realize tenders are being floated, bidders are coming in, and therefore I'm very optimistic on the transition.
Sorry, Sir, just before I come to you, I'm very conscious of the time and I don't want to overrun, and I can't see any clock here, so can I just check with the organisers? 5 minutes, thank you very much.
Can I make an uncharacteristic comment
Please.
about coal?
Please.
I think there's a difference. What we're saying here is you need to look at a country that actually has the resource and has coal, and the difference between that and a country that's importing coal. There's a big difference. And the growth rate in that country. So if I would put India and China, for instance, as huge countries, okay, together more than half of the world or half of the world, and they have ample resources of their own coal, and then we tell them as energy sector or as leaders around the world, you shouldn't produce your own coal and depend on imports. I think you need to utilize the coal that you have, do it responsibly, see if there are ways to mitigate that. But if the growth rate and the ambition of His Honourable the Prime Minister is going to stay intact, I think there is no way to do it if you say, I cancel coal. I could be completely wrong, but a transition to that and doing it slowly and making sure that people who have their own resources can also utilize their resources and come down. And what I'll tell you something we are doing for coal as Qatar. We're building the largest blue ammonia plant in the world. It's going to be starting production next year. That mixed with a lot of customers on coal are talking to us because you mix it with coal and it reduces it's one of the solutions to reduce some of the emissions from coal. But I think we should get away from cancel culture on everything. We need all resources to be on deck.
Let me just end by asking another potentially controversial question, and that's about global leadership in the journey towards net zero emissions and the 2030 climate goals. The fact that the US, the Trump administration, has withdrawn from the Paris climate deal and has rescinded the Biden-era green policy initiatives, how much of a setback is that for the transition and global leadership? Or is there momentum? Minister.
I mean, look, I think it's really important to say that we as the UK want as many countries in the Paris Agreement as possible. But I was very struck at COP29 after President-elect Trump, as he then was, had been elected, that there was such a will to keep going with this transition. I think this is an unstoppable transition. I think there are sort of two truths that we need to hold. One, this transition is unstoppable. Two, if we carry on going at the same rate, we're going to be, all of us, in deep, deep trouble as countries as we face the effects of climate change, because we're in a, broadly speaking, 1.5 degree world, probably a bit less than that, and it has already got very frightening prospects. So individual countries will make their own decisions, but I think the economics is driving us towards this transition, and in addition, I think the climate imperative is driving us towards this ambition. I'll just make this one other point to you, which is, in the UK, we see this as a huge economic opportunity. We see the prospects around jobs in renewables, jobs in carbon capture and storage, jobs in hydrogen, as a massive growth and jobs opportunity. So, to those countries that want to seize this opportunity, good, that's what we want to do. To those countries that decide not to seize that opportunity, that's their own decision, and they will have to make their own decisions.
Minister Puri.
Well, I agree almost entirely with what Secretary Miliband said. I can tell you our own example. As we are accelerating biofuels, we're already nearly at 20%. We're thinking of what more to do. It's a lot of money saved on imports. That money goes to our agricultural community. But overall, we are still spending $150 billion on imports of traditional energy. Please correct me, one of my... Now, if I see the price of green hydrogen coming down, it's probably about $3.5–4 dollars for a kilo now. But if I see it coming down, I am not a betting man, but I am very sure there will be such public pressure. The transition is going to take place, irrespective of what we or anybody else says. Transition, the journey is that. If we bring the price of green hydrogen down, I believe there will be such a shift to green hydrogen, because we've already demonstrated that the cost of solar energy is brought down from 25 cents to 3 cents. All you need is an electrolyzer. And I believe work is going on a frantic pace. So my response for our moderator, transitions will take place. The pace of that transition will be determined by steps that individual countries will take or we will take collectively. And I'm very sure that it's heading in that direction. I do think that we need multilateral and plurilateral engagements and discussion, and I'm sure we'll be able to navigate this.
Thank you, Mr. Puri. Mr. Biteka.
Yeah, thank you. I again want to reiterate that transitioning is inevitable. We have to move. But how do we move? It's very, very important. Let be allowed countries with resources that are responsible for generating electricity be allowed to use that space so that they can create security of supply. Because the question here is the security of supply, the affordability, because if you tell me about the hydrogen, which is really costly, that cannot be afforded by these developing countries, it's going to be something that we are pushing the big population out of the equation simply because of the terminology transition. I'll give you an example. In Tanzania, we mine coal, but we are exporters of coal, and we are not allowed to to put up a plant for coal plant. And here we export the coal to Europe, for Poland, for instance. This is the biggest buyer of the coal. And I think in their energy mix, above 60% of the energy mix is coming from the coal. But what is it? It is possible in other countries, but it is not possible in Africa. So this something has to be looked at. And we need what we are saying, a just transition. We need what we are saying, let's get something which is workable in a different country. We agree the move has to be there. We need to transition. But how do we do that? It has to be a formula which is created a close and which is really one size fits all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Saad.
I think enough has been said about that subject. I think I'll just...
All right. Minister Miliband, do you have any final thoughts on the transition? The consensus here is that it is unstoppable, but what is important is to find the right policy framework to manage and guide that transition.
I think it's been a great session, and I think, my final point, and I think it very much reflects what Minister Puri said, is that there are just huge opportunities to work together across countries, bilaterally, plurilaterally, multilaterally. These challenges that we are facing, and I thought our colleague from Tanzania put it very well when he talked about cooperation across borders in relation to grids and other energy cooperation. These challenges are such that no one country on their own can tackle them. The only way we can tackle them is with partnership, and I think that's very much the spirit of India Energy Week and indeed this conference. So I'm delighted to have been here today.
Thank you very much, Minister Miliband. And that's it for this panel, which has been very engaging, very stimulating. I'll leave you with some final words and final thoughts that really encapsulated the essence of this panel, and that is leveraging hydrocarbons strategically so that renewables can scale is the critical imperative and what we really need to see. So thank you very much indeed for joining us and for listening in, and we will have more stimulating conversations throughout India Energy Week, and thank you to our panellists.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you to our panellists for this very engaging and insightful discussions as we reimagined and rethinking energy security and then our strategic partnerships and the supply chains, and as they mentioned, collaboration is going to be the key towards navigating these transformations. May I request our dignitaries to be kindly taking their seats and requesting you all to remain in the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an important launch which is going to be taking place now. Please be taking your seats. May I request everyone to be there at their respective seats, requesting our dignitaries to be at their seats for there's an important launch happening. May I request the ministers to be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an important launch which we are going